Hi there, this is Carl. I want to bring up one major point here that I've been thinking about that I don't hear too many people talk about. I've had a bit of a discussion going on recently on the YouTube channel here about the virtues of open source software. I don't really want to get into it with anybody. It's not a debate that's really worth having because people are very, very deeply entrenched in their convictions on the topic, and you just can't change minds one way or the other. I will just say this. I have zero problem with proprietary software. I just don't have a problem with that concept at all. I don't have a problem with someone saying, I'm using this code to say something in terms of software code, in terms of computer code, to create a piece of software that belongs to me and my company, and we are going to sell it, we are going to hold the rights to it, we are going to license it, we are going to change it as we see fit or stop development as we see fit and sell it that way. I've got no problem with that. I don't think there's anything ethically wrong with that. I think there's a lot of ethically things right with that because it deals in ownership and property. I do believe, in intellectual property. I have no, as a composer, I have to believe in that. I don't write stuff for people to take it and claim it as their own and to change it unless I let them do that. So I just, that's where I'm at. Some other people aren't that way. They have very strong convictions and a very clear dogma on this about, what software should be. I don't think any of that matters. All I want to say is this. This is the only thing that matters to our discussion. If you are writing music on a software platform, you have a responsibility to save your music in a sustainable format. And that's your responsibility and nobody else's. It's not the responsibility of the software company that you bought your software from to maintain their software so that you can open up projects. It just isn't up to the... anything you buy has a shelf life. Anything you own has a shelf life. Even your life has a shelf life. It's all going to end. Everything comes to an end at some point. The conceptual idea that open source software lives on forever because of its open licensing, it's a fantasy. That's not really true. Things live as long as people want them to. They live as long as people work on them. And after that, they die. That's the end. There's a lot of open source projects that are dead out there that don't continue on, and that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. I think it's good to have open source projects to compete with proprietary projects, and I think open source development is wonderful, and everything I use is open source. There are very few proprietary things that I use. But that being said, the responsibility for what you create on the tool that you're using is up to you. That is your responsibility. You're responsible for how that survives. So save your information to sustainable formats. Now, what does that mean? If you are working in a digital audio workstation, be it a open source one or a proprietary one or a licensed one or one you paid for or one that's free but licensed, you should be rendering out your final mixes to an audio format that is widely playable and can be used in a wide variety of playback systems. WAV, you should be rendering out maybe to lossless format of some kind. Likewise, you should probably be rendering out stems of that project, various individual tracks of the mix, rendering those out and saving those apart. You should be saving MIDI files. MIDI is a sustainable format that has wide application. So make sure that you're saving your MIDI files. Export your projects as MIDI data in multiple channels, multiple tracks. Even if it means cutting up your project into several sections so that you can save, if you have more than 16 channels, you want to be saving multiple MIDI files so that you're saving MIDI data by channel. Write down and keep track of mapping. What instrument goes to what channel and what file. Keep text documents or something like that can reference that. Save all of this information to a folder and archive it. Put it on the cloud. Save it to a local location. If you have notation, you should be printing it out in sheet music form and saving it somewhere, filing it away. You should be saving in sustainable file formats like PDF that can be reproduced and brought back up later on, and you could transcribe from that in the future if you ever wanted to return to music. Do not depend on the project file format. That is just unwise. There's nothing wise about doing that, because your software has a shelf life. It will end, and you will not be able to get back to those projects eventually. It just will happen. The operating system on which you are using your software will advance beyond your software if development ceases. And unless you are a developer with an awful lot of time and knowledge on your hand, you won't be going back to that. You'll be moving on to something else. So, don't blame anybody else for that. That's your responsibility. I learned that the hard way a long time ago. You need to save in sustainable language format so that you can always reproduce it as music at some other point. So that's my speech. Anyway, I'm sure some of you will find problems with that and try to convince me otherwise. You're wrong. I'm right. I hope you weren't too annoyed by a little bit of my preaching there about open source stuff, but I just want you to know where I'm at and explain why the responsibilities really are in you as a content creator. Make sure you're saving your stuff in sustainable formats. Do not depend on your software platforms. Depend on the formats that have longevity, have been long-standing, have been time-tested, things that you can get back to, and ultimately rely on print, paper print, if you can, for notation. That's really the best way to archive. So good luck with all of this, and I wish you happy mixing.